Hi, I'm Trevor Hall, the founder of Comeback. Welcome to the Recovery Room, where we talk about sport, psychology, injury recovery, and a bit of everything. Hi, Annika.
Hello, Trev.
Welcome back to the Recovery Room.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm sitting here again with Annika Larson, journalist extraordinaire. And we are going to carry on talking about psychology, injury recovery, and the comeback program. And I think, what are we going to talk about this session?
We're going to talk about what comeback actually is and what motivated you to start comeback. And just before we carry on with that, just a reminder that Trevor Hall is a practicing psychologist. He used to be a professional rugby player and has been injured many times, and that really is why I think you know what you're talking about here. Very quick recap, if you've missed podcast 1 or you just need a little bit of a reminder, what is Comeback? What is the program about?
So in a nutshell, Comeback is an online, self-administered 6-week-long program that helps injured athletes, active people, and exercise enthusiasts heal better through psychology.
And why, and this is something we covered.
I can't remember, I remembered all of that. Yeah.
That was so well done. Why, and this wasn't surprising to me, but I think it was so important. It was like the main point of podcast 1 was a person who gets psychological support once they're injured is more likely to heal faster.
Yes. So we know that, well, let's put it this way. The physiological side of sports injury, the technology that we're using at the moment, the medicine behind it is excellent. I mean, there are things that are happening in the medical fraternity that is absolutely amazing at the moment. You just have to look at latest research with ACL reconstruction and how long it takes to recover to be back on the field. It's incredible. So though the physical side of things, the biological side of things is becoming incredibly advanced, the psychology, however, of injury recovery has been something that traditionally has been kind of left out. We've known for quite some time, I think most the journal articles that I was reading that I think was published late 1960s, even 1970s, talking about the psychology of injury recovery, how stress affects healing, how stress, anxiety, depression has a negative effect on the healing process, etc., etc. But it's only been recently in the last sort of 10 years or so that people have started to really look at it and take it seriously in terms of actually creating looking at interventions that seem to work to decrease stress and to affect more effective healing, basically.
Just a note, we are in Cape Town Central at the moment.
City
and
centre.
There are loads of taxis, and so there's quite a lot of background sound, which you'll just have to bear with us about, but it's like we live in a city, so there it is. You can hear the taxis hooting. But Trevor, why, so just take me back to, you're an athlete or just somebody who's really sporty, who is injured. You're suddenly not able to play. You don't have the peer support or interaction that you used to have. You may be a breadwinner and be faced with the possibility of not being able to be one anymore. That's kind of extreme, but there's this big vacuum left psychologically and socially if you're injured as an athlete, a player, or somebody who just really, really loves sport.
Massively. It's look, like I said in the first episode, you know, the psychology of an injury is it's an interesting one, because we know that the player or the athlete or the person who's injured, and let me just actually qualify this, you know, it's not only sports people. I mean, you could have somebody, you know, who doesn't play sports, etc., who's just working and slips and falls down the stairs and, you know, breaks their leg or something like this. There's going to be some sort of psychological ramification or consequences to that physical injury. And normally there's going to be confusion, uncertainty, irritability, frustration, all of these emotions that come with these experiences of having their life turned upside down. From one moment you're healthy, you're walking around, you're playing sport, you're doing what you're going to do. Next moment, like that, all of that stuff is flipped on its head.
I had that with COVID. I mean,
COVID is a great example.
I remember looking at a ceiling for what felt like weeks on end, desperate to go back to work. Felt that I was leaving my crew behind. I was letting my team down. That I could have given it to other people, and I wasn't getting well. And it was incredibly debilitating from a psychological side.
It's actually interesting you say that, because I had a few people who know me and heard about the comeback program and asked if they could actually do the program. And I, after explaining, well, listen, it's specifically for injury recovery, but if you want to, if you're sophisticated enough to convert the COVID issue into, the injury issue into a COVID issue and go through the program as COVID as your injury, then go for it. And a lot of them actually came back and said, listen, what a great program. That the meditations were amazing, the journaling articles, that's where they had to kind of think about it a little bit and do that switch. But the tracking of the program, the social connection tasks, it all actually was worthwhile even with that. So it's interesting you bring that up.
So I've done some of the program, and part of it is meditation and journaling, which is something I found difficult because it requires patience and some kind of stillness, which I'm not very good at doing, but it forced me to do that. And so I thought it was very helpful, and I think maybe it would be useful to tell us why you incorporated things such as meditation and journaling in the program, which is an online program.
So, in a nutshell, to summarize the psychology of an injury, and especially a sports injury. Injury culminates in stress. Okay, so your stress response is what is triggered when you feel like you're under threat. So I'm not sure if you understand the stress response, if you've heard about it. It's your fight-flight mechanism. Yeah. So in the past, the example that's often given to describe the stress response, and I'll say it very quickly and try not to butcher it, is that you're walking around in the wild as a caveman or woman, and you see a tiger or some sort of predator, and a part of your brain in your limbic system called the amygdala, which is your threat detection center, picks up that you're in danger. Okay. That very suddenly sends a signal to your hypothalamus, which is your chemical factory in your brain. It's where all your chemicals, etc., those neurotransmitters and whatnot that can go out of sync. That's where all of that gets manufactured. And there's a neurotransmitter that gets sent to your pituitary gland, and your pituitary gland then sends a hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone to your adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And then suddenly, in an instant, you're flooded with adrenaline. Now, the adrenaline is what, I'm sure you've had adrenaline before, you know what it is. And that is the stuff you need to get you out of trouble. Because when you're hyped up on adrenaline, you're not feeling that much pain. You've got loads of energy. It converts all of the sort of excess sugar and whatnot into ATP, into energy. It drains blood from your non-essential organs at that time, like your digestive system, your immune system, to your extremities. So it floods your muscles and all of that stuff with blood, and your heart starts to pump. You start to transpire because now you've got to cool yourself down because you're going to go on a run now away from this tiger.
Yeah.
And you go. So you either flee. If you can't flee, hopefully you've got a big stick or something like this, and you fight. There's another response that's come up with this, that's been studied recently, which is the freeze response, and that's quite an interesting one.
I'm a freezer.
Well,
I can be a freezer, like a gecko. You know when you frighten a gecko and it just stays very still and it tail comes off. So I can
Does
be
your tail come off?
I can either, if I'm running, for instance, fall and suddenly get up, especially in a group because I'm embarrassed, and I quickly run up and I don't feel anything and I just carry on running. Or if I'm faced with real danger, such as, heaven forbid, like an intruder or the fright of that, I'll just freeze.
So freeze is an interesting one. So freeze is also, so it's playing dead basically. And what the freeze, and I'll get to it now as well, because I'm leading up to what I'm going to talk about now. Freeze is also the underpinning stress reaction that is linked to dissociation. So a lot of PTSD and that sort of thing, or especially when people are overly stressed and they dissociate, it's linked to the freeze mechanism, where they actually freeze and they go into their world because they can't deal with the stuff that's outside of them that's causing them threat. Okay. So now a normal stress response, you need your stress response. If a taxi outside is bearing down on you, you're not going to jump out of the way out of love. You're going to jump out of the way with fear and anger and the stress, and your blood's going to be pumping, and it means your stress response has worked well. Okay. But once the threat is away, so once the tiger's away and you can't see it anymore, a normal stress response is that it switches off, okay? And then you go back to homeostasis again, all right? So your heart stops beating as fast and the adrenaline is turned off and whatnot. What happens is normally, if there's a threat that continues, the adrenaline switches not off, but is turned down a little bit, and it's replaced with cortisol. Now, what cortisol does is it maintains the stress response. Okay. So that stress response is maintained because there is a feeling of continual threat. Only when the threat, when the brain or the amygdala reads that threat is gone, will it switch off the cortisol and adrenaline production. All right. So now what happens with the sports injury is, first and foremost, the pain of the injury, the shock of the injury triggers your stress response.
Right.
Then the psychology of it kicks in. Now there's uncertainty, which causes stress.
Right.
If you want to stress somebody out, you put them in an environment where they're uncertain about their future. They don't have clarity on what it is that they're allowed to do, and you take away any sense of control. That's going to stress out anybody. Okay. And this is what happens in the injury cycle, is that suddenly the person's injured, they're in a lot of pain, they're uncertain about their future, and they have no control over what they're doing. So they become stressed.
So it sounds terrifying.
Well,
me.
It can be. It really can be. It's not a pleasant thing to be injured. Okay. Now, how people react to it and whatnot is, again, it depends on the experience, how many times they've been injured before, what their personality structure is like. There are a whole lot of things that can make the experience complex, but I'm talking very generally now. So then what happens is, either in that phase, they find support for them. So obviously, on a rugby field or a cricket pitch or football field, American football field, a doctor normally comes on, or medical people, they take the person, they touch the person, and they say, okay, you're going to be all right.
What's that like when that happens? I've often wondered, I've seen somebody injured on the field and I think, or on the pitch, and I think, what's going through their mind at that time?
It's horrible. I mean, look, I can speak from personal experience. It was, my reaction normally used to be, what have I done to myself? How bad is this? And how long am I going to be out for?
Okay, so that's what you're thinking. You're not thinking about the pain, you're thinking about what the consequences of this is going to be.
What the consequences are, yeah. But that was my reaction. Okay. But I've got a bit of a fight reaction, stress response. It's kind of like, okay, I'm actually a bit more freeze fight. I'll sort of be shocked and then I'll go.
And what is the coach saying to you at this time?
Well, the coaches normally, you only speak to the coaches and whatnot afterward. It depends on the sport, but an individual sport obviously will be different. But in a team sport, especially like rugby or whatnot, I presume with American football and, ice hockey or something, the coach you'll only see maybe after the game or something. You'll get taken off on a stretcher, or you'll walk off the field if it's not too bad, and you'll go and sit with your team. But what's nice about team sports, and if you'll see it on TV a lot, you know, if somebody walks off the field, the doc will have a look and kind of test whatever it is, and you'll get a fairly quick overarching kind of diagnosis of what it might be.
Okay.
You know, you'll do the knee test, the ligament test and stuff, and these tests are pretty good. You can see, you know, if you've done an ACL or medial collateral ligament or whatever it is. Obviously, if the diagnosis, if the injury is a bit more complex, you have to go for an MRI or an X-ray or something like that to see what the damage is.
Okay.
But what's interesting, and this is about sports injury, is very often if you see guys going off the field and they're sitting with their team, you'll see their teammates sitting next to them and sort of look at their injury and then look at them and go, "Are you okay?" And the guy normally sort of sits there and not, you know, sort of shakes his head and is a bit forlorn, and maybe someone might put their arm around him or give him a tap on or her on the tap of the shoulder or something. So immediately that is an indication of, I'm kind of okay, I'm sore, I don't know what's going on, but I have social support.
Okay.
There's someone next to me, someone cares, and that time of the injury is so important, you know. And I don't think it's something that medical teams, etc., actually, they all do it sort of intuitively, but it's such an important thing actually in the injury recovery process.
Do teammates, are they generally supportive, or in a very competitive level, are they also, "You really messed this up for us, thanks"?
In my opinion, not the latter that much. They're normally quite supportive. What's interesting about this, and this is where come back, because I want to get back to the program as well. What's interesting about working with rugby teams, and I'm presuming, you know, I haven't worked with the NFL yet, or you know, baseball or any of the American sports or whatnot, or football for that matter. But in what I've observed in the rugby teams is that they are highly superstitious and ritualistic. And this is something also that's come out.
Really? In what way?
Well, I'll tell you now. So this is something that's also come out of the literature quite a bit. If you want to see burgeoning perfectionistic rituals in sport, you go to one of these team sports' change rooms just before a game, and you'll see the most every manner of different ritual that you could think of, that these guys go through to prepare themselves for whatever sport that they're playing. So
like what?
Well, for example, I mean, my ritual used to be, you know, I used to strap my ankles and knee, or I used to put tape on my legs for line-out jumping and whatnot. Now I'd strap my wrists. And so my ritual was that I'd go to training. I'd always clean my room, my house, before I went.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't go to a game unless my house was clean. I'd do the dishes. I would put everything away like perfectly, because I would think, if I come back and I'm sore or if I've got an injury, I'm not coming back to a dirty house. I can't handle it.
Okay, I hear you with that.
So that would be the one ritual.
Okay.
Then I would rock up to training and I'd get my jersey, and I would take my jersey and I'd put it front ways on my face like this, and sort of over, and then I'd put it back ways, and I'd actually say a prayer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Then what I would do is there were other things as well, but it was the routine that I did. Then what I would do is I would go to the physio, and then to get my ankle strapped, and he always had to strap the left ankle first and then the right ankle. And I remember one game, it was for Biarritz. It's a French team, so the physio's name was Patrice Boutevin. He's a great guy, actually, a good physio too. And he was distracted and I was distracted. I was sitting on the physio bed and he started strapping my right leg. And one of my teammates actually said to him, he went like this, "Patrice,
how can you do this? You messed things up."
I looked at him and I said, "Are you crazy?" Like in French, "Are you crazy? You nearly lost us the game there." He's like, "Oh, Trevor, I'm so sorry." You know, he cuts off the strapping and he's like, "Oh, I apologize." And he started strapping the left one as well. I was like, "Sure, you nearly ruined it for everyone, you know."
I suppose it's a way of organizing your brain and preparing yourself.
Exactly. And so along that line of thinking, what's interesting is that when someone's injured, at first the team is normally very inclusive. So that they want to know what's going on, and they're like, "Oh, okay, you know, you're going to be fine and things are going to be great." But as you watch the person come to training And the core group, the playing group, how they interact, slowly but surely this guy or girl starts to detach. And one of the reasons, and this is more along my own theory about it, okay, but there is some research that backs this up. The guys that are in the team, because they're so ritualistic and superstitious, they don't want to be associated with the injured players. They're worried that they might be almost infected in a way by this injury. So there's superstitions. Very often nobody will touch crutches. So we used to joke around. I used to like throw my crutch at somebody and you know, and just sort of like dodge it, you know, because they don't want to touch that. It's, you know, they don't want to look at what can happen.
So it's not like an injured animal in a pack that's slowly getting edged out because they're weaker and they can smell weakness.
It could be, but in my opinion, no. It's more of a case of I don't want to look at what can happen in this team. I don't want to look at what can happen if I carry on playing the sport because I know it's there at the back of my mind. It's happened before, it might happen again. And so what happens is that a lot of these injured players, they start to feel really ostracized and isolated.
Sure.
Okay. And that's, I mean, we can talk about this in the next episode perhaps, but that's one of the reasons why I came up with what I call the Recovery Mastery Group, which was actually a group therapy approach to support the injured players in these teams, specifically in rugby teams, and that unburdens the rest of the team, the playing core and the administration to look after these players. So you almost take them away from this group, but at the same time you create this cohesive element within the group that people actually enjoy spending time with. And it's a skills exchange. You've got senior players, junior players, or anyone who's injured who comes to this group once a week, create their own rituals. So one of the rituals that we had when I was running this group up with the professional team in Johannesburg in 2019 was that they would have to select, after every session, would have to select someone to get coffees for the whole group. And that was the ritual.
Okay,
you know.
so that they became useful and they became
exactly.
part of the pack again.
Exactly. So there was a pack within a pack. And what happened was, like, through those team dynamics, you could see how it unburdened the rest of the team. They don't have to worry about these guys anymore. Okay, they can carry on doing this stuff. And then when they were interacting, there wasn't this sort of underlying unsaid need for these players to be part of that pack. So it was a healthy separation and a kind of waiting period where people knew, okay, well, when this person's right, they're going to come back into the team. And the last thing I'd say about that as well is it's also part of the team dynamic, is that there's with this supportive group being held every week, there was and this is just my opinion, I have absolutely no research to back this up, it was just something that I noticed, was that I think the team recognizes that if something were to happen to them, they're not going to be discarded. So it creates this kind of confidence in the players who are playing, that they're going to be okay if something were to happen. It's a kind of unsaid, almost intuitive feeling, I think. It's something that I really noticed, and I wrote quite a bit about actually in the notes while I was implementing this group approach back in 2019.
Something about comeback, which I think is particularly useful, is it's actually about using the injury time, the recovery time, the healing time productively.
Yes.
And I don't think that's just about sports injury. I think that's about any crisis that one's going through in your life, is actually you're transitioning or you're facing some kind of life-changing event. You can actually use that positively. And that's part of survival too.
So there's a lot of literature around what we call post-traumatic growth. So you get post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of that. That might be the subject of another podcast. But
post-traumatic growth, okay. That's
interesting. The concept comes from the idea that people have noticed that individuals, and groups of people, when they go through traumatic events, they are often ones who come out of the other side and they seem to have learned something about themselves. they seem to have, and in that learning, they've seemed to have understood how to let things go and how to grow in different ways. And they use that in their life going forward. Although the traumatic event or what it is changes them significantly.
Right.
But they use it somehow, they develop some sort of resilience, they develop some sort of new appreciation for life. And it's a very, very common theme. So the comeback program, although I didn't specifically design it around post-traumatic growth, it was something that I had in mind, is the comeback program is designed to use that injury recovery time to have some sort of growth experience. So if
That's what I liked about it.
If you think about yourself, for example, if you were just, look, you're a really good journalist and like you're a very, very good news anchor. But I presume that your talent and your skills as a news anchor and journalist didn't come from a very smooth trajectory of stuff.
No.
It came
there was
from
a lot of traumatic stuff that happened in that process.
Exactly.
As just part of the job.
Exactly. So and I presume as well that in those traumatic times in your life where, you wanted something, you wanted a promotion, you wanted a story and you didn't get it and life said you wanted to say yes, life said no, all of these things, going through what it is that you went through, you had to continuously go back to the drawing board and go, okay, maybe I need to refine my vocabulary. Maybe I need to be more comfortable behind a camera. Maybe I need to be more assertive in the way I deliver something. Maybe I need to work on my confrontation skills or my conflict management skills. But that wouldn't have arisen if you just had this sort of smooth trajectory towards where you're at now.
I find that people who do have a very smooth and easy trajectory, they tend not to last as long in the industry that they're in, which is quite interesting. Yeah. They either tend to move on to something else or they tend to get bored or they move on. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. So the comeback program was based on these principles where you've had this traumatic injury, it's severe, it's kept you out of what you love doing. There's a recognition that one's life is completely discombobulated. It's sort of, it's turned on its head. And now you've got this time. You've got this time, whether it be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, whatever it is. But that time that you would have been training, you would have been exercising, you would have been prepping for games, competitions, whatever it is, you don't have that time anymore. Well, you've got the time, but what you were going to fill that time with is not there anymore.
Right.
It's gone. It's gone. Forever. You'll never get that time back again.
Do some people just sit on the field and watch their teammates play because they have nothing else to do?
A lot of them do, yeah. And then there can be that sort of rumination that starts to kick in and whatnot.
Yeah.
So what my thinking around comeback is that you've got these highly driven people, okay, who exercise, and people exercise regularly and play sport regularly, etc., are normally quite highly driven. There's normally a conscientiousness that comes with them. They're normally, they've got drive. They want to do stuff.
Disciplined, yeah.
They're disciplined. So now you take away something that they were loving doing, and you don't replace it with anything. They're going to probably replace it with things that are negative. Rates of alcohol consumption, drug use, rates of alcohol consumption and drug use and eating disorders are higher in sports populations globally than they are in the general population.
That's amazing.
And one of the, again, major triggers in that is injury. So when a person's injured, they have the spike in alcohol and drug consumption and eating issues.
Interesting. I didn't know about the eating issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what comeback is designed to do to a certain degree is replace what they've lost with something that is going to be worthwhile, so they can use that drive to go, okay, I can't play my sports, I can't do these things now, but I can learn to meditate. I can learn how to journal. I can learn how to visualize correctly, which is an incredibly powerful skill to have, especially as a sports person. I can learn to do mindfulness meditation. I can learn how to connect with the people in my life better than I did before. I can learn how to create and maintain relationships. I can learn about myself, basically. And at the end of the day, they provided, the comeback users provided with the PDF printout of what their recovery time was like. So they get this graph with all their tracking measurements, etc. They get all of the journaling answers that they put in, and a few tips and whatnot of what to expect later on, when they get back to their sport.
So this is not just for professional athletes.
No.
I mean, I was speaking to somebody the other day whose son wanted to become a professional water polo player, I think, and is 16 years old, 17 years old, and was injured and quite badly. And that's been his life.
Yeah.
And that was going to be his life. He was going to get a big sports scholarship at an American university. So
The stakes are high these days.
That's a massive thing for a teenage, a young adult. That's a massive trauma.
Yeah. So look, a guy like that, he would be a prime candidate for the comeback program. It's there. It's designed to support the person psychologically so that they de-stress enough that they can heal more effectively.
But you say it's not a replacement for therapy.
No, it's not a replacement for therapy at all.
Explain that to me.
Therapy is something very different. So therapy is, in my opinion, and again, psychology is a bit of a mess these days. There are literally 1,000 different ways 1,000 different modalities of psychotherapy. Okay, there really
It's hard to choose which one. I mean, we all need it, but it's hard to choose which one. Yeah. It's going to work for you.
Exactly. So, in my opinion, what therapy is it's a relationship. It's a relationship that you form with a professional who's interested in the psyche, which actually, from the Greek perspective, means soul, and who has some experience in mapping out what might be in the person's psyche and mind, and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And it's a relationship that you form with somebody. I think that it's something that takes commitment. I think it's something that's long-term. I know that there are a lot of CBT therapists and DBT therapists and other behavioral therapists, et cetera, who might disagree with me. And I think that therapy modalities like CBT, DBT, REBT, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, I think they definitely have their place, and they can be very effective in relieving symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of stress, symptoms of these things. But I think for real change and self-awareness, to actually really understand yourself, I think it takes a little bit longer and requires a commitment to a sort of long-term depth psychology process.
It's quite a frightening step to undergo and commit to therapy. A sports person, an athlete, how likely are they to, in your experience and in your practice, are they to commit to a process such as therapy?
Again, Annika, it depends. I think they're not as likely while they're playing sport to commit to a psychotherapeutic process.
Because of time, or?
Because of time, and because, when you're playing sports, and especially professionally and amateur, amateur sport, sport is such a brilliant, and exercise is such a brilliant way of creating wellness. I mean, you go for a jog, you feel good. It's, you exercise, you get into those endorphins sort of going through your mind and, your body, etc. It's such a great, it's a really, really great, what would I call it? Prophylactic?
Yeah, I mean,
even cure at times to certain things.
It's integral. Well, certainly for me, to my well-being. It's just an added sort of motivation to be in the world, I guess, and take part.
And so now you get these professional players, etc., and athletes who are training all the time. You know, they feel good normally. Things are going well. It's not something that a large portion of the sporting community is going to get into, psychotherapy, unless there's some sort of trauma. So the athletes who I see for therapy as such have experienced some sort of trauma, injury being probably the most prominent, and then after that, you know, general traumas. You know, they've lost someone close to them, they've had relationship issues or something. Something has happened that's triggered some sort of anxiety or depressive response or something like that. Then I would say that, you know, the psychotherapy is something that could be prescribed for that, definitely.
I think we throw around the word stress a lot these days, but, you know, it's, oh, I'm feeling stressed, oh, I'm not feeling well. The two almost seem to go hand in hand. You're saying the big ideal here in terms of recovery is to keep stress down.
At a minimum, yeah.
Okay, at a minimum.
Yeah. To try and get to allow the body to switch that stress response or off, or at least lessen the stress response.
How is stress linked to injury recovery?
So, as I said earlier, when you're stressed, you're
in that heightened state.
You're in that heightened state, and the sympathetic nervous system switches off your non-essential organs, your digestive system being one of the big ones. Okay, so now if you think about it, if your digestive system is not working correctly, you're not digesting your food, you're not getting the nutrients you need to recover well physiologically. Your heart is pumping, your adrenaline is going 24/7, you're not going to get the sleep you need to rejuvenate. If you're not sleeping, your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that helps you store memory, is not activated. So cognitively, you're going to start forgetting things. You're going to start becoming, you could even start becoming a bit disorientated from time to time. Yeah. So all of these systems that should be working, you know, homeostatically in balance, the stress response throws all of that out. You're not digesting your food. You're not getting the nutrients you need. You're not getting enough sleep. And then because of that, you stay on that heightened stress level.
And you're not exercising, so there's
there's no release of adrenaline unless you cry.
Yeah.
You release adrenaline through your tears.
Can we talk about that? Because I've noticed, I've spoken to quite a few people recently who say, men especially, who say they've started crying, and this kind of surprises them quite a lot, and they don't know what to do with it. Why are we crying more? What does crying mean?
Well, that's a big question. I mean, look, to cry is obviously it's a physiological response to sadness, to fear, to happiness. And there is adrenaline released in tears.
Okay.
You know, that's how it is. But it's also a call to action as well. You know, from an evolutionary perspective, I mean, I could be wrong here. I haven't read evolutionary literature in quite some time. But I think, if I remember, showing sadness and crying is an indication to someone that you need support. You know, so it brings people in. I mean, even us now, we're talking about it. If you think about it, you found somebody who said that, you know, well, you were...
Quite a few male friends who say they've started crying more, or they've just started crying. And I think maybe it's becoming more acceptable to talk about. I don't know. I'm not a guy. And that's not to stereotype women sitting weeping all day. But I'm just saying quite a few... I'm hearing more and more male friends saying to me, I sat down and I couldn't stop crying. I think it's kind of interesting.
I think people are very, very stressed these days, Annika. I really do. And I think men, you know, they carry a lot of stress. And I think that generally, I mean, I know women do too, but there are a lot of stressed out people at the moment. And I think that when that stress can't be, or is reluctant to be expressed verbally. It comes out physically. It can come out physically in pain, digestive problems, headaches, tension, and tears.
Okay, so in terms of the comeback program, the support that one gets, a lot of it is, you say, we need the social. The athlete, the injured person needs the social. But what does comeback bring to the table to help with that healing process?
So from the social perspective, one of the comeback tasks, so comeback is broken up into 5 different task sets. So you've got meditation, journaling, social connection, tracking, and information gathering. Okay, and all of these tasks work together to support the injured player or athlete through 6 weeks, which should get them to that positive outlook stage of their recovery. So the social side of it, the social connection tasks, these are, you've got, I think it's 3, if I recall.
We're going to do you know that we're going to explain
each one of them
in
okay,
in
then we can wait for the next
3.
No, we'll wait for episode 3
to get the breakdown of that. But I'm interested in that summary of what those tasks are. Just those main tasks. You talk about the tracking, you talk about the meditation, you talk about the journaling, and the social
connection.
The social connection, and we can talk about that later. But they're all kind of integral to the program.
So the research that I did on injury recovery, and I continue to do, all of it indicates, well, it all sort of funnels down to these 5 different task sets. So there are other things that you can do. I mean, if you're injured, you can go for cold water swimming, you can get your nutrition right. But from a psychological perspective, these 5 task sets that I put into Comeback in the design comes off research that over and over and over these skills come up over and over again in the injury recovery literature. So I took the 5 most evident ways of dealing with psychological stress from injury and incorporated it into this program that's designed to lessen stress, create self-awareness, and then encourage more effective healing.
We're discussing now a whole range of psychological issues and how they're related to injury. And the podcast, when it comes out and the program is launching, the 2 will really run parallel to one another. I think maybe we just need to remind people of where we can access that, because people by this stage will want to be signing up for Comeback or listening to more podcasts.
Yeah, so if you go to www.totalcomeback.com, you go onto the website and you can check out all the information there. There's blog posts, there's the science behind the program, there's some testimonials from people who have done the program, and then you've got your sign-up journey and off you go.
So episode 3, the Comeback 6-week program explained. Will you have me back?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Annika.
Thanks, Trevor.
See you next time.
Bye.